And maybe it'd be interesting actually to talk a little bit about comparing VC to other asset classes, given that you've written a book about hedge funds. But there is this interesting idea that it's the only asset class where the asset chooses the investor rather than the other way around. Given the differences, and given that you've now met some of the very most successful VCs in the world and some of the most successful hedge fund investors in the world, what do they have in common? Would VCs be good hedge fund investors in general, or is it just a totally different skill set, mindset, worldview?
I think it's a different personality type to begin with. Hedge fund analysis, hedge fund investing is probably best practiced on the whole as either an individual sport or a sort of small team sport where secrecy is quite important. You don't want to have other people copying you. Of course, there are exceptions where an activist investor takes a position in a company and then goes aggressively public on why the company that they've just taken the position in needs to do X, Y, Z. But a lot of times, your secret sauce can be arbitraged away if other people copy you. So secrecy is important. It's about variant perception, which is based on a purely analytical view of prices and risks, and you don't really have to make judgments about the people behind the currency you just shorted. A little bit. Okay, on central banking, you might say, well, I think the character of central banker so and so is that he's going to cave and allow inflation or something. But that's really a marginal part of the calculation. So the joke about hedge funds is that when the macro investor Lewis Bacon did well and bought a private island, it made no difference because he was already so insular. He was just this figure behind a set of screens, brilliantly making calls. Clearly, in venture, you've got to be out there. You've got to be meeting entrepreneurs. You've got to be meeting the 5 engineers they want to hire. You've got to be meeting their customers. You've got to, just do meetings. And so that takes a much more outgoing personality type. And then, of course, landing the deal is partly about getting on the wavelength of the entrepreneur, because the entrepreneur will pick you. It's, the asset chooses the money. And so I think, the EQ side is very important in venture and not very important in so you get the sort of extrovert versus introvert thing. I think it's a big difference. And then, there's the whole sort of company building, gritty side of VC, which doesn't really have at all an analogy. In fact, it's almost diametrically the opposite. So, one classic thing that hedge fund people will say is, you must never be married to your position. You should never be emotionally attached to it. You should wake up in the morning and think, at the new price that I'm seeing on the screen, is it still something I want to own? Because if not, I'm going to get rid of it. George Soros was famous for sitting in a meeting, hearing one comment from the person that he was talking to, and leaving the meeting to flip his position. It's just extreme, this ability to go short as well as long, which obviously doesn't exist in venture. But also the ability to just change your mind and maybe do it twice in one day. Venture is obviously, completely the opposite. You're getting into the trenches with a founder, and you're going to be there for 5, 7, 10 years, and you're married, all right? And then you have to roll up your sleeves, and you can't go short. You have to, you have to build a company and help and do whatever you can. When answer that phone call at midnight on Friday, saying, I'm having a breakdown. I need whatever. All those stories about the emotional solidarity that's required. So I think it's very different.